These days it seems like the lines between genres are getting harder and harder to define. Whereas in yesteryear one could point to a game and go, that's a platformer and that's a shoot 'em up. These days the typical game will usually be a combination of several different genres, often producing new and interesting results. Such is the case with Dungeon Defenders. Is it an action RPG? Is it a tower defense game? Is it cooperative wave-based survival? Well, whatever it is, it's one of the most addictive, fun and well-designed co-op games I've played in ages. The object of the game is to defend the Eternia crystals from waves of attacking enemies over 12 different locations throughout the castle where our heroes live. Before each wave is a building phase where you can lay out traps and defenses that the enemies need to get through in order to reach their final target. You can choose between 4 classes: Squire, Huntress, Apprentice and Monk. Each has their own fighting style and abilities in combat, and each has their own set of defenses to slow down the enemy hordes. The Squire, for example, can build strong physical defenses that enemies have to destroy in order to move past, but is limited to only melee combat, although wading through crowds of enemies swinging a sword is extremely satisfying. The Huntress, on the other hand, is a ranged specialist, and can lay traps that won't stop enemies but will affect them in different ways, from doing massive damage, slowing them down, or removing elemental effects. The Apprentice's magic attacks aren't as powerful, but can be charged up to do splash damage or knock enemies back, and he can summon the towers from which the tower defense genre gets its name. Lastly, the Monk strikes a powerful balance between melee and range, but his defenses benefit the most when enemies are trapped inside them for long periods of time, and thus need very clever placing in order to be most effective. Thus, the game creates a brilliant combination of strategy and action combat. The levels are designed in a way that challenges you to make the most of your limited resources, as well as making it tricky to get quickly from one part of the map to the other, and thus forcing you to at least partially rely on your defenses. Once in combat, things feel great. The game runs at a smooth 60 frames a second, and all the particles, sound effects and numbers flying off enemies as you hit them make it all so much fun to be down in the trenches laying waste to your foes. Even without all the tower defense stuff, Dungeon Defenders is a really good action RPG. Killing enemies earns XP, which leads to gaining levels, improving both your hero and the defenses they summon. Monsters even drop loot, the game making it so easy to compare items at a glance and either equip them or store them in your inventory. There's so much loot in fact that you'll probably want to sell most of it, but the game makes that super easy too, and you can pour the excess mana into leveling up your equipment. With so many spells, abilities and defenses under your command, it would be very easy for the game to become an overwhelming nightmare of hotkeys, but luckily this isn't the case. Instead, the player uses this very clever radial menu that once you use it a few times puts everything you need at your fingertips at lightning speed, and there are hotkeys for the most important abilities, like healing yourself. The game really comes into its own when playing in a team, because the different classes are extremely well balanced to complement each other. For example, the Apprentice's towers are quite vulnerable on their own, but work very well when protected by the Squire's barriers. The Monk can create a healing aura that everyone can use when things get hectic, and with her ability to become invisible, the Huntress is able to sneak around keeping everyone's defenses in good repair. Good teamwork is especially useful when it comes to battling the larger enemies like ogres, or the 3 bosses with their massive health bars and unique combat patterns. In fact, the biggest downside of the game is that it kind of demands that you play with your friends, as the levels don't really seem to scale depending on the number of players, and so those without a full team might find themselves needing to replay previous levels in order to get strong enough to take on the later challenges. With 12 levels to be getting on with, not to mention the fact that the game has 5 difficulty levels and the added longevity that cooperative play provides, you get a lot of value out of the core game. But if for whatever reason that isn't enough for you, then I have good news. Trendy Entertainment have supported the game extremely well since it was released in 2011 with add-ons and DLC. For a bit of extra cash you can unlock dozens of maps to play on, some of which support up to 6 players and provide an even steeper challenge for veterans. If that weren't enough, there are 8 additional heroes to unlock, some of whom, like the Summoner, completely changing how the game is played, turning it almost into an RTS. Considering that the game is only about $15 on Steam, this is a lot of fun for a very reasonable price. If you and your friends are looking for a new game to play together, then I can highly recommend Dungeon Defenders, a prime example of just how great a smart combination of genres in the right proportions can turn a small game into massive fun.